Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody's had a great month since we saw you last time. We have a wonderful event planned for you tonight. We are without our commissioners, as you may have noticed. I did hear from John that they are actually at the function at the Crosley, celebrating the Fleet Masters for Manatee County for 2015. So they will, I'm sure, be back to join us next month, but just to kind of give you an update on what they're doing. They are out and about still, but they're at another function. So we will start, as we always do, with our invocation, and we are going to have past President Sandy French lead us in our invocation.
Lord, our heartfelt thanks for another beautiful Florida day and for the time this evening that we can share with our friends in Republican Fellowship. Each day you give us means a new beginning. You have given us this day to use as we will. We can waste it or use it for good. What we do today is very important because we are exchanging a day of our lives for it. When tomorrow comes, this day will be gone forever, leaving something in its place we have traded for it. We want it to be gain, not loss, good, not evil, success, not failure, in order that we shall not forget the price we paid for it. Lord, we ask you in this holy season of Easter and Passover to bring your peace to the world, to bring home those defending our freedom safely to their families. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
And we'll do the pledge, followed by God Bless America. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
We will actually go ahead and introduce our speaker. We'll give him plenty of time to speak while you all enjoy your dinner, and then that'll also allow us to have time for any questions. Of course, with elections not too far off in the distance, I do think this is very important to get all of the information and updates that we can. So we'll allow him some time. Who we have tonight is the managing editor of the Shark Tank, Javier Manjarres. He was awarded the 2011 CPAC Blogger of the Year and was acknowledged by the conservative activist group Freedom Works for his efforts during the 2010 election cycle. He has numerous videos and articles from the Shark Tank that have been featured on Fox News, The Hill, Wall Street Journal, CNN, NBC, and lots of other national and local news stations. Manjarres has appeared as a guest commentator on Univision's Al Punto and numerous radio stations, including being a regular correspondent for 92.5, Fox News and Daybreak with Drew Steele. He's also a regular political contributor for Newsmax TV. So lots of great credentials, but I'll let him explain a little bit about himself. So help me welcome the author of the book Brown People, Javier, the book Brown People, Javier Manjarres.
First of all, I'm not gonna make you do any homework. That's Jane's work. Does this come off? Could you guys? Okay, good. Okay, never mind. There we go. Okay, we're good. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It almost didn't get here. A lot of snowbirds on the road, but I'm here. Again, thank you. I want to talk about the book, but also I want to talk about the bigger issue. I think a lot of, as Republicans, I'm Republican as well, our biggest concern is 2016, who is going to replace the guy up in the White House. We have a lot of, thank God we have a lot of good candidates to choose from. Rubio will be announcing on the 13th. So far we have Ted Cruz, then we have Jeb Bush and others. I heard that. But the biggest issue I think that concerns most Republicans, I think, is because it's due to the biggest growing voting demographic, and that's the Hispanic community or Latinos. I think a lot of people have asked me everywhere I go around the country and the state, they ask me, how do we get this vote? And I always say, listen, like I told Reince Priebus and Sharon Day and all the poobahs, I think they know what they're talking about up in D.C. and in Tallahassee. I tell them, look, it's very simple, and that's why I wrote this book, because they asked me to consult them, and they just took one word and did nothing with it. So I decided, hey, why don't we just poke them in the eye and write a book and just give a so-called brown print as opposed to a blueprint on how to best message Hispanics. I don't use the word outreach in the book because, think about it, when you reach out to someone, like I'm reaching out to Octavia, I can't get to her. I like to use the word inclusion. Because think about it, and the person who gave me that idea was former Congressman Alan West, who's a good friend of mine. He worded it in a way that it made a lot of sense to me, and I was talking about it, but it didn't. It really made sense when he told me a couple years back, and I'm thinking, how do you reach out to these people? And I go, you really can't unless you bring them into the fold. If you and the book is about one thing and one thing only. It's not about immigration reform, but it's about everything is about immigration reform. And the reason why I wrote the book is because the best way to win over the Hispanic folk down the line, because you're not going to win them all, is going to be by understanding who they are. Just like understanding the black community, who they are, what makes them tick. That's the same thing with the Hispanic community. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm a little Hispanic, a little brown around the edges. Oh, thanks. Listen, trust me, my head is so big it can't get through that door. Listen, it's not going to affect me. But thank you. But in all seriousness, a little background. My parents came here, immigrated legally from Colombia. And that's a big, interesting point because, like, Senator Rubio was a good friend of mine. Before I sort of finished the book, I went over his house and asked him, look, I wrote a couple chapters and you're in it. So he rolled his eyes like, oh, crap, what did you say about me? So there's a lot of funny stories about Marco. We won't talk about how he almost killed us along the road and up in Martin County, but I brought it upon him like, what do you think of this idea? He said, this is great because guess what? You look like a gardener and you're not Cuban. And what he meant by that is that I'm not, because he gets touted as being, obviously he's Cuban, of Cuban descent, but they think that if you're Puerto Rican or you're Cuban, you have a pass, a free pass in this country, that you're really not a true Hispanic. You're not brown enough, as a lot of liberals will like to tell you, but my parents immigrated here legally. The next story I told him, which is, I'm going to get ahead of myself, but this speaks to the book about my parents. When I told him this, he looked at me, laughed, and said, I should have had you both deported. He's referring to me and my dad. And again, to get ahead of myself, I'm 42. Don't look a day over 20. But my dad... When I was 41, I decided to interview my parents to give the book context, give people context of who I am, where I came from. I know what I'm talking about. Well, I interviewed my mom. The chapter is called Moms and Pops. And so I interviewed my mom. She gave me this whole elaborate story about who, why, when, where they came from. Then she goes, you need to interview your dad. So sure enough, 2 days later, my dad came over and I said, Pops, Mom said this, that the reason why you were going to get deported, and the reason why you joined the military to avoid deportation was because you had too many parking tickets. He looked at me and said, your mom's a liar. My dad has very bad English. He's been here 30-some odd years, and his English really stinks. And he goes, what happened? I go, I just fell over. He's like, you don't understand. What happened is this. I overstayed my visa. And instantly I thought, oh, my God, I'm an anchor baby. because he overstayed. I didn't understand it. I was flabbergasted because I was thinking, oh my God, this made the book. That's what Rubio said. This made your book because I can speak to what 40% of illegals are. They're overstayed visas. You know, and my parents' story is interesting, and I bring this up because, like I said, it gives a lot of context in that my dad came here illegally, overstayed his visa, worked for 2 years illegally, working 2 illegal jobs. Now, he ran the risk of getting deported, but someone took him under his wing and said, listen, Alberto, that's his name. You need to do the right thing and file your paperwork to become a U.S. resident, a resident alien, and then eventually a U.S. citizen, if that's what you want to do. He said, yes. So, again, he filed the necessary paperwork. He waited over a year, and then he got a call. He got a call from, I don't know who, what agency, said, listen, Alberto, your application's been approved. You just need to leave the country to become and enter as a resident alien. Hence my mom's second lie. She said that we went on vacation to Canada, which there's a lot of truth to, and a lot of it's a big lie, because she was pregnant with me, so she said that I was in Canada. I don't count myself as being in Canada in her womb. My brother was. But the thing is that he had to leave the country. Instead of going to Colombia and spend all this money going there and running the risk of being stuck in a banana republic and coming back here, he went to Canada. Immediately filed the paperwork at the embassy, got his resident alien card, and then the vacation started. So there's truth to that. So what do you think he did as the first thing he did when he came back? Well, in between those 2 illegal jobs, he always went by this Army recruiting station. And he's like, you know what? He went and inquired, and they said, you have to be a resident alien. That really pushed him to become a resident alien, because he wanted to afford my mom, help us out. She was pregnant with me, and she had my older brother. But so first thing he did, I think after a week, he enrolled in the U.S. Army. Mind you, he went to boot camp. My parents went on government cheese because you can't really live. Back in the 1970s, you can't live, or 71, or you can't live on the pay of a P1 or a private first class. So they went to Germany, and then everything is all she wrote. A year later, in May of 1973, he became a U.S. citizen. But the moral of that story is, hey, you know, the Democrats will not tell you these stories like the one I just told you, about people who are here, overstay their visas, but want to become part of the fabric of the United States of America. They believe in the American exceptionalism. They believe in what we believe in, because that goes against their narrative, their talking points, if you would. But if the minute they started doing that, how many people in here would actually, if they knew of someone who overstayed their visa, who wanted to be not so much a Republican, but wanted to be American, how many people would actually take them under their wing and try to guide them down the right path? I mean, I think most of us would. You know, I've counseled a lot of people who have overstayed their visa or are about to overstay their visas, and I said, here's the deal, and they've gone through with it. I mean, there's a couple that are still resident aliens, some that are, one I think is overstayed, is still an illegal, but he's trying to do the right thing. He comes from Venezuela. And again, the book is about embracing these people, who Hispanics are, because you guys don't know who I am. You guys hear me spew whatever I spew on Newsmax, or you read what I write, but at the end of the day, you don't know who I am. And I think that's the key to winning any election, and first understanding who you're messaging. And again, I think we can all agree that the messaging that towards minorities, not just Hispanics, has been a failed message from the Republican Party. Now let me go back digress a little bit. Minorities, to me, the only minorities in this country are illegal aliens. I don't think blacks are a minority, or African Americans or Hispanics or Latino Americans are a minority. But getting to know who these people are, like, look, how do you message me? How do you know what my issues, what's more important to me? You know, I spoke to a couple Hispanics a couple days ago, and I've been speaking to them over the past couple of years. Obviously, I live in a community of many Hispanics, and they seem to tell me, why does the Republican, first of all, why are you Republican, and why is the Republican Party so anti-Hispanic? Why do you guys only talk about immigration reform? And it just dawned on me, because that's the narrative, that's the reactionary narrative that the Republicans are following, the Democrat following, and that's the winning issue for the Democrats, losing issue for the Republicans. So as I ask them more questions about what's important to them, the single most important issue to them, which is it's tied to immigration reform, is economic reasons. Why do you even think they come here? I mean, I don't see you guys going to Mexico to look for a job or Nicaragua. They come here for that. You know, why do you think so many professionals in those countries stay there? Because they have good paying jobs or careers. So I always tell people, they ask me, like the other day, someone in Charlotte County asked me about this. I'm like, look, why do you think they come here? They come here for economic reasons. Why do you think they pick cotton, or they pick strawberries, or they start their own business? A lot of these overstayed visas start their own business legally, washing cars, you know, mobile detail shops, mowing lawns, landscape services. So I mean, it makes sense that they kind of agree with what we agree with and what we believe in. So understanding them, who they come from, is very simple. And again, they ask me, how do we reach out to them? And I'm thinking, it's easy for me to do so because I kind of look like them, and they can relate. They'll open up more because a lot of them are. I can say this about the black community as well, is that a lot of people are in fear that the white Republican Party wants to deport them all, or that they're against them. You know, case in point, my mother watches Univision. I tell her not to, even though. But she called me a couple of months back and said, "Oh my God!" During the election cycle, of course, the Republican Party wants to deport all Hispanics, even the legal ones. I'm like, who said that, Univision? And I tell her, I go, Mom, that's not true. You know that. I know, but they're saying it. I'm like, well, why are they saying that? I'm like, well, Mom, because that's the narrative from the Democrat Party. It's run through the Univision. And one of the chapters in the book is called the Hispanic Media Bias. And it's all about Univision and Telemundo and their ulterior motive to bring back old Mexico. And there's a lot of big movement to make the Southwest United States part of Mexico. And it's a big movement on them. And a lot of people don't know about it, and don't know about it, or don't want to talk about it. It's a big threat. So I told my mom that's not the case, and then it made me think even more. These people don't know any better. Unless it's someone like me telling them the truth and they're willing to understand, I can't be everywhere. You know. So I say, I'm thinking, if I write this book and I kind of spell it out, what's the single most issue that everyone, regardless of political affiliation, can relate to? And I'm thinking, how was I raised and how did I grow up? Where did my parents come from? And one chapter sums it all up. It's called God, Family, and Dinero, in that order. Because before there's any political affiliation, regardless of where you come from, God plays the biggest role in your lives, or since day one. I mean, how many people have been baptized or had the first communion, or you know, you name it, whether everyone's been raised under Judeo-Christian beliefs, even if outside of this country, especially in South America, Latin America, with the majority of the people who are affiliated with a religion, well, they're Catholic for the most part. So, funny story, and I said, God and then family. Second is family. After God, they don't care about anything else but their family. Whether they're poor or they're rich, they care about their family. Then comes the dinero, the prosperity part. They want to make the better lives for themselves and their family, provide for them in other countries, and that's why they come here. So you see the tie with immigration reform, or with immigration. So a funny story is, my parents immigrated here, like I said, from Colombia, and they were Democrats in Colombia. They were true-blooded Democrats, my whole family. And one of the business misconceptions is that a lot of people that come from South America and Central America, they think that, hey, we need to be part of the Democrat Party because it's democracy. You see where it's derived? I mean, that's a simple one, but most people don't think of it. They think if Democrat Party is derived from democracy, we need to be part of it. And that's the case with my family. So for the longest time in 2004, my mom was sick and tired of hearing me talk about Bush. And at the time, and now I see it as a godsend, I was building a house with my ex-nightmare. And we had what's so funny? Well, we had to live with Mother for 3 long weeks. That means I had a curfew for 3 long weeks. And I was 30 some odd years old. So she didn't want to talk about politics because we just butted heads. So I'm thinking, how do I get to my mom? I said, you know what? Darn it, with the consent of the ex-nightmare, she rolled her eyes. She goes, do what you want. It's your mother. I decided to test my mom and give her a litmus test every single night. One question. However she answered it, I drop it. I wouldn't ask for any details. So I asked her, Mom, you know, you come from Colombia. You came here for economic reasons. Yeah, but you're a school teacher. She was a school teacher. I go, you hated paying dues. union dues, teacher dues. You hated paying all these taxes. You always complain about all these taxes and how they're asking for more money. And I'm like, Mom, wouldn't it be great if the government didn't ask for money or try to tax us? Oh my God, Javier, you're right. I hate it. I can't. Check box number 1. That's right. Then the following night I said, Mom, you're the one that says that God, she's very Catholic. You're the one that says that God will hear you twice as loud if you sing. And my mom, everywhere I go, Javier, like this. I mean, even if it's not a Sunday, she'll be like this. You know, she'll be glad. This is funny. She'll be happy to hear that I speak to so many clubs that there's always an invocation. She's like, oh my God, God prayed, listen to my prayers. You know, but she doesn't get that. But the second night I asked her about, Mom, you're so Catholic, you're pro-choice, right? Bendito, we'll never say that. Check box number 2. Then I said, you know what? Also, you know, you believe in traditional marriage. You know, I personally don't care, but she's like, yes, it's against the Bible and all this. I knew check box number 3. Night number 4, I asked her, I go, Mom, you know, we're a country of laws. You're sympathetic to immigrants, the illegals, because they come here like, but they break the law, right? And it's wrong. We should obey laws. Absolutely. We came here and we obey the laws, and I obey the laws every day, and I pay my taxes. I'm like, check box number 4. Rule of law. And then I was trying not to laugh, because every night I was thinking, oh my God, I couldn't wait for dinner. And then I asked her, Mom, I said, what do you think about this overbearing government? I go, don't you think it'd be better if it was lesser government? This all goes back to the taxes. And I go, look what's happening on TV. Look what they're doing. They're trying to tell you to do this. The Democrat Party is also trying to take God out of everything, the dollar bill, you name it. He goes, oh my God, this government is unbelievable. Who's the president? This is wrong. Who's in charge? She was very apolitical, but still a Democrat. Check box number 6. And so the following, I said, Mom, I told her what I was doing. She goes, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you are as right-wing as Rush Limbaugh. And she looked at me and goes, oh my God, who's Rush Limbaugh? I go, Mom, and I explained to her, I go, Mom, this isn't about Republican principles and values or Democrats, it's about American principles and values. And I explained to her, I said, this country was created on Judeo-Christian values, right? This is what you learned way back in the 70s, what they taught you when you were going through the resident alien process. She goes, absolutely. I'm like, well, they're trying to take it all. Who's they? Democrats. I said, you're a Democrat, but this is not the Democrat Party of JFK. See, a lot of these old-timers, Hispanic Democrats, they think that JFK was the best thing since sliced bread. Because he was Catholic, but back then, he would be considered a squishy Jeb Bush Republican. Just kidding. But Republican nonetheless nowadays. You know, LBJ is a whole different animal. But that's what she remembers as a young girl, or she was 20 some odd. So I told her, Mom, the party now is different. The Democrat Party here is not the Democrat Party what you think. You know, this is what they believe in. And I showed her, and she couldn't believe it. So within a couple of weeks, guess what? She changed her registration to Republican.
Can you dress in drag and talk to women's groups not to vote to Hillary Clinton because...
But you know what?
And they're women?
Listen.
I can't wrap my head around that.
You know what? I think that's an underlying self-esteem issue where they need to see a woman in power because maybe I don't know why.
They don't even know what she stands for.
They don't care. She's a woman. It's like a lot of blacks vote for black just because you're black.
Yeah,
And listen, and that Hispanics just as the same because they're very tribal. Case in point, my mother again last year, a friend of mine who's running for Congress in Orlando. Oh my God, Javier, we got to support him. I'm going to vote for him. I go, Mom, you live in South Florida. You can't vote for him. It doesn't make a difference. He's Hispanic. We got to vote for him. You see? Tribal. And that's an issue we have moving forward. You know, Hispanics are going to get, Democrats are going to get their votes. It's about, I always say, mitigating the damage that they do. And again, that's being educated. And how you do that is being educated and getting to know who you're trying to message. Because again, the biggest issue that Hispanics have are economic issues. If you address that and not just say, hey, you know what, I know you're here legal or illegal, or you know friends that or you have friends or family that are here illegally or not, but or you're sympathetic to the cause. You know, you need to understand who we are, and I need to understand who you are. And the best way of doing that is, again, engaging in conversation. It's as simple as saying hello to someone. You know, you may not go any further. You may run into someone in the Publix and say, hey, how you doing? Have a nice day. See you again. If they're going to your Publix, they're bound to be back and forth at Publix 2-3 times a week, and they're local. So chances are you're going to run into them. So if you see them again, say hello. Again, so you're building a rapport, just like you build a rapport with anyone else, like everyone in this room. And I'd say it's a longer process. You're not going to win them overnight. But, you know, what if you meet the right person and you become friendly with them, and eventually they ask you, so they start talking about politics, and you start talking about politics about them. They're going to tell you the biggest issue for them are education and economic reasons why they're here. I mean, some of them work 2-3 jobs. You know, my mom worked 3 jobs, and she was here legally. My dad, when he was legal, he worked 2 jobs as well when we were growing up. So they understand what it is to work hard, and they appreciate, they respect that. If you kind of, you know, you go to them and say, listen, hey, I appreciate what you're doing while you're here, and I can relate. If you can relate to them just a little bit, you've opened up that door, and that's the biggest battle, is trying to get that conversation going. And that's what a lot of people that I've spoken to ask me, how do you get that conversation going? I'm thinking, just say hello. Don't start talking about politics and saying that, and just throwing immigration down the throat, because they've heard all. They just tune out, horse with blinders. They don't want to hear that because they're expecting that. And a lot of them won't approach you because they're afraid that like, all you whiteys out there are racist, you know? And again, it's a big problem, but again, it's not going to happen overnight. And I always tell people, look, one at a time. If enough Americans take it upon themselves to get educated somehow, then you know what? So when the time comes when they do meet someone that they can maybe befriend, you're not going to turn them all. I mean, there's going to be, like my dad, you're not going to turn him. He's very conservative, but he loved Reagan, but he voted for Obama twice. That's because he was influenced by an ex-girlfriend. My parents are divorced. By an ex-girlfriend who was a very Chavista communist from Venezuela. So that's another story. Yeah, that's that woman. Just drives me nuts. But anyways, or drive me nuts. But it's as simple as that. And again, what opens Hispanic side, and everyone, because everyone I feel is inherently conservative to some point because of this Judeo-Christian upbringing. Black community especially in here. You know, think about it. If you gave a litmus test to all blacks, for the most part, they will be, like I did to my mom, they are wholeheartedly behind you. I mean, think about it. They are almost they're Rush Limbaugh's, only dark with tans. I'm telling you, I've had a lot of experience with them. But the minute you bring up Republican Party, they think race. And that's been the narrative set by the Democrat Party. It works for them. So how do you get around that? You know? Right. Well, but that's the thing. If it wasn't that thought process, because this is all conjured up by, you know what, and I'll say this because I saw an interview from a Martin Luther King interview from way back when. Of course, I wasn't around when Martin Luther King was around, or when he was murdered. But, you know, I wrote a story that really upset a lot of blacks, and they didn't get it. I said Martin Luther King was the very first, I didn't say racist, but the very first person that instilled a lot of racism. He didn't do it purposely. But terms like Negro, he threw around a lot. It was okay. It's a different era, though. It was okay to refer to blacks as Negroes, and Negro is Spanish for negro, black. It's okay to do it. It's okay to, the United Negro College Fund. You call an African-American Negro now, what's going to happen? You know, back then it was okay. It was okay, but I understand back then Martin Luther King was okay to do it, to say it. You know, and he gave many speeches. He talked about white America, black America. It wasn't considered racism then because there was a lot of guilt back then about segregation. Now you hear the Jesse Jacksons of the world, you hear the Al Sharptons talking about white America, black America, and they're overtly racist. We get that. Different time, different place. But again, same thing with Hispanic. The same thing goes with Hispanics. They are afraid that Republicans or white America are against them. That's why I said they're very tribal as well. They stick with their own, believe it or not. And a lot of their own is, you know, a lot of radical racists, a lot of radical Hispanic racists that unfortunately I get looked upon as being an Uncle Juan. That's me, Uncle. Not your Uncle Anita. I'm Uncle Juan. Your husband is Uncle Tom. Okay? No, seriously, case in point, I used to do Univision a lot before they booted me off. And I remember once Jorge Ramos, their Meet the Press on Sunday mornings is called Al Punto. So they had me the token taco on there every other Sunday. I can say that. And basically, he asked me, go, Javier, before we used to tape on Fridays and show on Saturdays. And so he asked me, Javier, nice guy. I go, why are you so anti-Hispanic? I looked at him like, what the f are you talking about? I said, how am I anti-me? Look at you. I knew it there. Look at me. And why are you against immigration reform? I go, what do you mean, look at me? I knew what he was referring to. That I didn't look like the Senator Rubios or the Senator Cruzes of the world. I was a little tanner, a little more ethnic looking. You know, if you put an apron on me, hey, whatever. And so I asked him, I go, how am I any less Hispanic than you? I said, Jorge, you came here on a pass. He goes, what do you mean? I go, you came here from Mexico City, legally, work visa. And you stayed here on a work visa. You became a resident alien, right? He goes, absolutely. He goes, and you became a U.S. citizen. So you went through it, the legal immigration policy. How are you telling me that I'm anti-Hispanic when you follow the law and I'm just proposing that we all follow the law? He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to say because he knew I was right. He shut down, of course, then we went into talking about the birther issue, so that's another story. But the point is that if in the black community as well, if you counter that narrative, you're called out as being anti-Hispanic because you don't believe that all immigrants, whether they're Hispanic or not, should be here legal. I mean, should have a free pass. And I don't buy that. Even with my dad having to overstay his visa, he could have very well been deported, and I could not be standing here. I would not be standing here. I don't know. But things worked out the way they worked out. But again, and I think most people believe that this is a country of laws, and we need to respect it. You know, a lot of these people, you ask them that you bring it up to them, you broke the law, but they say we leave these lawless countries, lawless regimes. They leave here for a reason. Aside from the economic reasons, look what's happening in Venezuela. Colombia's been the same way for decades. And they've had revolutions. They still deal with FARC. I mean, there's a lot of killings down there, kidnappings. It's a very lawless country. But again, it hasn't had that coup d'etat, if you would, that Venezuela has, that Bolivia's had, Ortega, Nicaragua, and these other countries. But it's still lawless nonetheless. So a lot of these people leave that. So they know about how lawless it is. So they come here because we're a rule of law, a country of laws. So they want that. They know that to come here, they have to break the law at least once. Which is, they're not happy with it. I mean, they'll admit it, but they're trying to do better. But they're trying to, in a way, repent for what they've done. But they're not going to go back, because what's left, what's waiting for them back in these countries? Nothing. I don't know if anyone here has been to South America, Central America. I've been to tons of countries, and they're all the same. I got used to bribing cops. I mean, not bribing cops, but paying off cops. When they pulled me over in Colombia, they're like, "Can we see your paperwork?" I'm like, "Yeah, here it is. We need your paperwork." "Oh, that paperwork. Hold on." And you give them a 10,000 peso bill, and they'll leave you alone. It's like that there. I'm not even exaggerating because I can tell you some stories. But the thing is that that's where these people come from, and it's important again to understand that, hey, this is who they are. That's why they come here, and they appreciate that. If you took any Hispanic aside and said, "Look, I know you somewhat. I don't know you individually, but I have an idea where you come from and where you come from in Mexico, the plight down there. I understand the economic disparity down there. I understand this." At least you're sympathetic. At least you're showing that you're interested in them. But the perception is that you're not interested in them. You guys just want to ship them all back, because all it takes is a few crazies to want to ship them all back. And I always tell those people, look, seriously, if you ship them all back, how do you do it? And these are these purist types. I said, how do you do it? You're for less government. Okay, so let's say we have 20 million illegals here. Okay, go round them up yourself. No, we got to hire all these cops. I'm like, you have to create probably the biggest bureaucracy in the United States of America to be able to round all those people up, which you're against, bureaucracy in big government. And how are you going to round them all up? How are you going to ship them around? Where are you going to put them? So I said, are we going to become the American Gestapo and round everyone up You know, like we see in the movies, and then load them in trains and send them to FEMA camps or wherever for deportation. You can't do that. It's not feasible. It's not going to happen. And so they still say we ship them all back. And look, in a perfect world, if immigration laws were in place, people would leave by attrition regardless, and they would leave on their own.
I think losing that identity.
Well, here's the thing, is that I agree with you. The assimilation is important. Most of them would like to assimilate. And here's, I always say, the low-lying fruit, my dad's, those 40%ers, it's easier to pick them off because, again, a lot of them are professionals. You know, a lot of them are professionals that come from other countries. Listen, to come here legally on a visa, it costs money. It costs money to get the visa, A, be approved for the visa. You have to show that you're going to come back to that country. You know, so you have to show that. A lot of times you have to put money there, un abono. In other words, put money aside to say, hey, I have established here in Colombia and I'm going to come back. I have a profession. Okay? So to come here, they have to have, they usually come from means. They're professionals. They have to pay for their ticket to get here. Usually they come with their families. So.
Use their higher education system also.
Right. But the thing is,
We'd like to retain us.
well, let me finish. What I'm saying is those 40%ers are the ones that we want to embrace. Okay, those are these ones, not so much Hispanics, but also Europeans that come here because they live also within socialist governments. So to me, those are the ones that we want to embrace because they have more to offer. The ones that run across the border, you're right, they don't want to assimilate. They just send money back. Some of them do, most of them don't. I've met a lot of them. I was driving today on the way here. I pulled up next to some guy who has a Honduran flag, says Honduras, hanging from his windshield because their allegiance is Honduras and not America. And I'm guilty because when I was 14, 15 years old and I started driving, my dad was all about, he was a U.S. citizen, but he was all about Colombia because, you know, it's all childhood stuff. So I thought it was cool to have a Colombian flag. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm not Colombian. I had a Colombian flag just because my dad did. Then I realized, wait a minute, that doesn't really look cool, my red Mustang. But I'm an American, and I took it down within a year. And I said, that doesn't make any sense.
You want to honor your heritage, but you still, it's
Right.
a hard thing.
But yeah, exactly. No, you want to do that, and you always follow your parents' lead. If they're, I was speaking Spanish all my life. I only learned English when I was 5 years old. So I only speak to my parents in Spanish. I don't know how to speak to them in English. I'm like, what? How do I speak to you in English? I just don't get it. To me, it doesn't make any sense. I do if I'm around you guys. If my mom's sitting there, I'll probably start yapping in Spanish to her if it was just her and I. but I understand that. But the thing is, not all Hispanics want to assimilate. Not a good portion don't. They want to go back. You know, I used to have a landscape design business. And I used to meet a lot of these Hispanics, and they would just send all their money back. And they say, hey, if I get deported, oh well, whatever. I'll save enough money to go back, but I'll come back here just to work a menial job because it's inexpensive to pay to work here. And the problem you brought up, and I'm going to get to the Q&A right now, but you brought up a good point as far as the schools. You know how you're not allowed to wear certain things. You can't wear an American flag. Well, that's school districts. I mean, these are this liberal education system that we have in this country. I mean, it is what it is. Again, you're right. You can wear a Colombian flag or a Mexican flag on a shirt, but you can't wear an American flag. And how does it make any sense?
And it calls divisiveness within the kids.
Another thing that the Hispanics, if you ask them, and my mom was one, she didn't know, they automatically think that the official language of the United States of America is English. It's not. It should be. It should be etched in stone, like it is in most countries. And I brought that to my mom as attention. She's like, what? It's English. Everyone speaks English. We have to speak English in this country. And she's like, yeah, but Mom, but it's not the official language. It's not like the official bird of Florida or fruit is orange or whatever it is. You know, like on Wikipedia you see that. The official language is not English. And I explained to her why. And she goes, that's not true. It can't be. And she didn't want to believe me, of course, because my mom knows everything. But it's the truth. And a lot of people don't understand. They assume that English is the official language. You have to tell them they're just flabbergasted that it's not. I think if we made the official language, it'll cause a big upheaval with the liberals and the ACLU. But I think it'll set a tone that a lot of Hispanics will respect that. A lot of immigrants as a whole will respect that. That, yeah, this is a country of law. It's the official language. it may even push a lot of them to assimilate even quicker. Because you go down to the boogie down in Miami, let me just tell you, there's some pockets down there. I know people that came from Cuba, Venezuela, you name it, they don't speak a lick of English because they don't have to. They're in these little enclaves where they don't have to. They go to the neighbor. All the signs are in Spanish. Some senator's mother is that way. I won't mention his name, is like that. She's been here 50 some odd years old, and her English is worse than my pop's. She understands it, but when you don't practice it, you kind of forget it. So if you're speaking Spanish all day long, 365 days a year, in your little community, all your friends only speak to you in Spanish, guess what? You're going to forget it. Happens to me all the time. When I go to Colombia, I speak 2 weeks in Spanish only, no English. I start forgetting words. Or when I go there, I'm like, how do you say automobile in Spanish? Oh, duh. And so you get it. You just remember it comes back to you. But these people, years and years, they don't officially assimilate. They come here to assimilate, but that's the biggest problem I think we have in this country. But I want to take your questions. We already started with the Q&A. Again, there's a lot of stuff in the book that's interesting to read, aside from the funny Marco Rubio points. But as far as the whole dealing with Hispanics, and as far as what the bigger issues for them are, and not so much immigration reform. But again, the whole book, it all boils down, when it comes to politics, immigration, because that's the biggest threat. The biggest existential threat I think that we face in the United States of America is also losing our identity through immigration reform. And I think that's the narrative, and that's the issue. That's what the Democrats are driving at. Because again, real quickly, this whole Obama amnesty thing, and I know maybe some people roll their eyes, I say, look, there's nothing we could do about it. It's the law now. If we overturn the law, we actually fuel that narrative that we're all racist and we're all anti-Hispanic, and they run with that. And they have an advantage of us a little bit in the media. So if you have someone go in there and let's say Senator Ted Cruz or Rubio or Jeb Bush win the White House in 2016, God willing, and they repeal Obama's executive orders on amnesty, guess what? They become then the racist president and his whole party. It's a lose-lose. So I always tell people, I'm not supporting amnesty. I'm full proponent of illegal immigration. But instead of those 5 million that just got the amnesty, let's embrace them and say, listen, buddy, you're here. Nothing we can do about it. We're against how you got here, but you're here, so let's get to know you, and you get to know us. Because why surrender those potential votes to the Democrats? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not condoning amnesty whatsoever. But if they're here, they're not going anywhere because they're here on a free pass. Guess what? Why surrender? Why just go after? That's what he wants. He wants Republicans to move back and surrender and not go after the votes. But if you tackle them, guess what? Of those 5 million, 1 million become voters. And of those 1 million that become voters, what if we pick off 300,000 of them? I don't know. I mean, it beats losing 1 million voters to them. Questions? Right. No, you can actually become a stronger person by doing so. I think. But again, it's about assimilation. Not everyone's going to assimilate. And again, to your point about immigrants, even remember way back when, I don't remember, but I've read a lot, the Italians were those dirty scoundrels that came here illegally. All you Italians, but still, but again, yeah, you too. Oh, but you see, my point, back then, they were, that's where the term came from, right off the boat. That's not fresh off it's not a slur on against Hispanics, it's about Italians. And we'll look what the Italians gave us. The Scarface, not Scarface, the Godfather, for God's sakes.
And walks without papers.
Exactly. There you have it. And the Jersey Shore. Just kidding. Right. And again, that goes to the title of my book. First of all, I disagree. There aren't any black people in America. I think it's just African Americans. Just like Hispanic Americans, there's no brown people. The whole point of the story, the book, the why I got the title, I couldn't think of a good title. I think it had to be punchy. Well, I heard our old friend Alan Grayson refer to Hispanics last year as brown people, and I didn't take offense but laugh. I was like, what an idiot. I go, where does he come? I go, where does he get this? And I started studying up, and there's been a brown power movement in this country for years. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, but I'm thinking the black community why do they do this to themselves? Why do they accept being called black, a color, a hue? I don't accept being called brown, so I joke on it. I'm like, oh, I'm not brown, I'm more color, a cafe color. a lighter shade of brown. But why would people want to be referred to as a color? Like, you're brown, you're yellow, you're pink, you're black. I mean, what is that? They did it to themselves, but I don't want to see, because also Hispanics and in Asians are referred to as brown. They're categorized as brown. I don't buy it.
But you just had a president that said,
Right. Well, he's saying,
African American, you're black.
well, he's saying, well, that's what I'm saying. He's now saying, he's referring to Hispanics as brown. He's calling people brown and black, which is, again, that's part of the racially divisive. Well, yeah, exactly. No, listen, that's their narrative because that's what wins elections from. That's called desperation. If you can't run on the issues and win on issues, you have to go towards the divisive issues, immigration, the racism, color, all that stuff. No, I mean, before the school districts, the parents are raising these kids. Look, I was raised by the crack of the belt, okay? And to this day, I mean, my parents crossed line a couple times, but to this day, I'm thinking, you know what? That last crack to the butt really knocked me in line. I mean, it's how you're raised. Look, my mom was a school teacher, and I used to hear all the horror stories. She used to call the school, the teacher, the moms and dads and say, listen, your kid is in school. That's not my effing problem. You're the school teacher. You deal with it. I mean, I would listen. I didn't believe her. She would let me listen to the phone calls with the teachers, with the parents. And she was in an inner city school in Broward County, Boyd Anderson, an F school. So it happens at home. Obviously, the school districts are a big problem. You know, they put down the curriculum. They tell you what you have to teach. They're the ones that pushed my mom out of the classroom because she refused to pass these kids who never showed up for class. If they were F students, they got an F. They said, no, Mr. and Mrs. Manjarres, give them Ds. She refused to. Guess what? When my mom started that school, there were 7 Hispanic teachers and like 6 white teachers. When she left, she was the last Hispanic teacher. They pushed them all out. They pushed because she wasn't conforming with what they wanted, their narrative. And again, you're right. It has a lot to do with the school district, but has everything to do with the family and their upbringing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of single-family homes where the parents, you know, they do their darnest, and but a single mom raising kids. But a lot of these single parents, I don't care what they say, a lot of them don't. Like the lady who just told my mom to screw herself because she didn't want to be bothered with her kid. People haven't woken. People just for the longest time put faith in the government. Look. When I grew up, when I was going to elementary school, I remember learning about Paul Revere, the Constitution, and from what I understand, they're not being mentioned.
No, that's a no-no today.
And in the first, second grade, I'm like, oh yeah, Paul Revere, all this. I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting. How the Pilgrims. I remember the coloring books, the Pilgrim. I mean, it's not being mentioned anymore.
Done away with Columbus Day.
Right.
Autumn weekend or something.
You know what? But again, where's the pushback? You know, where's the pushback? Who do you have to blame? It's like I always say this about the Cuban people. My dad will say because it ticks him off. It's like, you know what? The Bay of Pigs happened. Where's the pushback then? Okay, you lost. Why haven't the Cuban people pushed forward and started a revolution like they did in Colombia, like they've done in Venezuela? For whatever reason. I mean, that's his opinion. And I'm thinking he makes a good point there. But again, in this country on education, where's the revolution on education from? We see it now, years later, on Common Core. It's a big deal now. You know, Common Core is part of the education fabric for how many years? And now with the testing, people are just up in arms that so many legislatures, including this one in Florida, are pushing back. They're saying, let me just rethink this over. You know, Governor Scott, who's all for Common Core, and now he says, we're not doing testing. You know, because there's so much, again, and this has only happened over the past, 3-4 years since the Tea Party in 2009. Look, elections have consequences, but you know what? We're dealing with Obama, but if it wasn't for Obama, we wouldn't have this resurgence, this more educated electorate, which has a lot of it comes from the resurgence of the Tea Party.
Jeb Bush is also big with the
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
But I think everything else, you need to follow the money. Who's making the money out?
Well, listen, that's a whole, listen, if you change one book for one 8th grade class, one book on social studies, you know how much money they make off that? Look, and everyone knows, it's not a secret that you tie Pearson to the Jeb Bush Foundation, all that stuff. That's all going to come out in the wash.
But I think here,
Well, if they change them because, again, there's new additions. I mean,
listen,
No, that's what that you took the words out of my mouth. Some things just don't ever change. What they make them change, they'll omit things. You know, like they omit Columbus Day. Oh, we omitted Columbus Day, so we have to change the whole book. He said, you know, it's been good for decades, and all of a sudden it changed. I mean, I understand current history. They're going to revamp books over the past 10, 15 years if they want to stay current. But how often does algebra change? Or geometry? Seriously, no, really. Or biology, okay? You know what? We haven't discovered a new black hole. There isn't a 10th planet or whatever. So it all stays the same. I get it if you're talking about history books. You know, because history happens every single second of the day, but it's all money. It's like you said, follow the money. And again, I think the education system will be front and center this election cycle, especially and only because Jeb Bush, that's his token signature issue. He will be on the hot seat because he'll have to answer to all this, and if he doesn't, he's going to lose. There are a lot, but I always tell people, look. Is that I saw this firsthand at CPAC last month. I was front row when they all spoke, including Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush, I know that my friends at CPAC told me, Jeb Bush refused to speak unless he didn't have to give a speech and just give the Q&A because he didn't want to get heckled. So there was a lot of people that heckled him, but instead of heckling him or booing him like they should have, they walked out. So what he did is he bussed a bunch of Jeb people in from K Street. I was front row, and I'm thinking, why are these people clapping that he just sneezed? Like, he didn't say anything spectacular. So I looked at him like, oh my God, everyone's wearing those old vintage red Jeb stickers. They brought them back. And then I looked, I counted 5, 6, 15, 20, and then I looked to the back. There was like 30, 40 people just standing. They didn't care who was behind them. They didn't care that they were obstructing someone's view. They were cheering Jeb at every turn. And no matter what he's like I said, if he sneezed, if he said something different, great. And they're cheering, like giving him a standing ovation. I couldn't believe it. They were there to quash any jeering, any heckling from what they expected, because it was reported, and they busted. My friend at CPAC said the Jeb Bush campaign came in, Right to Rise came in and bought a bunch of tickets, bust them all in. They saw the bus. People took pictures of the bus. I just couldn't believe it. And then we hear, it was reported yesterday, I picked up on it, about the emails that Jeb Bush between Matt Gaetz, there was a FOIA act that was a request that was honored, and there's emails between him and Representative Matt Gaetz where Matt Gaetz says, listen, we're going to file legislation to push back the election, the primary election 2016. It benefits Bush. Bush is like, we'll give you the thumbs up with that. Just keep us pointed. There was collusion there. So my point is this: I go around the country and the state all the time, and no one is supporting Jeb Bush. Okay, there's people that are, but for the most part, for different reasons. But when someone is trying that hard using those type of Democrat-like Alinsky tactics to win, that stinks of Obama to me, because that's what he did to win, and that's cheating. Because I mean, that's cheating you guys and cheating Democrats as well. You know, cheats everyone. So again, I have nothing against Bush. On issues, we disagree on a couple things. I think he's a nice guy. I've known him for a while. If he is the nominee, I will support him, because I mean, I'd rather have a Bush than anyone on that side. But anyone on that side, I fear, will beat Jeb Bush, because a lot of people will stay home. You thought it was bad with Romney? It'll be worse with Bush. It'll be worse with Bush, because when people stayed home with Romney, it was more the evangelicals. It was about religion, I think, for the most part. And now it goes further than that. We're talking about grassroots people that they realize, you know what, they just give up. And they realize if they give up, you're going to get like a Julian Castro or a Elizabeth Warren. I'm not concerned with Hillary. I'm not concerned with her. I think, like I said, I think it'll be someone like a Julian Castro, who would be that token Hispanic that they want. That'll bring out that brown guilt, if you would, that they had back in 2008, the black guilt. I see it. I mean, it's plain as day. People don't want to accept it, and people look at me like, Julian Castro makes sense. I'm like, of course it makes sense. If in the book I wrote about his mom. His mom is as racist as they get. Her name is Rosie. And he writes fondly about her, that she was an activist. She was with La Raza. You're familiar with what La Raza is, right? I wrote extensively about that. She was an activist. She was for the Brown movement. I mean, this woman is like racist. And then you have someone like Eva Longoria, who looks like one of my ex-nightmares, and God bless her. She is. There's a reason why she's one of the spokesmen, because she is cut from the same cloth as Castro. She studied Chicano studies. In Chicano studies, my mom studied them. She's a school teacher in LA, in Los Angeles. She was mandated to study Chicano studies because it was part of the curriculum, because California has such a large Mexican-American population. If you didn't know, Chicanos are people who don't think they're American but don't think they're Mexican. They're Chicanos. They're Chicanos. And so when I remember I was really young, when she was 15, she was telling me all this. I used to go to the campus, California State University Northridge with her, and I would just read in the library, and she would tell us all this she's learning, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Back then it didn't make sense to me. Now it really doesn't make sense. And I'm thinking it's just the equivalent of black liberation theology. Chicano studies is black liberation theology, only directed towards the Hispanic, the Mexican community. It's a problem, but again, what are we going to do? Throw our hands up? Next question. Come on. Don't make it easy on me. Go ahead. Oh. There's a difference between Hispanic and Latino, believe it or not. There's a big difference. It's in the book, and I'll tell you. Hispanics, okay, let's go with Latinos. Latino, believe it or not, I laugh when other brownies, I call them, like to refer themselves as Latino. I'm like, really? You're Latino? Yes, so are you. I'm like, okay, so that means that she's Latino and she's Latino, because really, if you break it down, if you want to talk about the ABCs or talk about binary code, if you would, and Latinos also include Portuguese, Italians, French. Oui, oui, comment allez-vous? That means oui, oui, you're very pretty. That's all I know. That's all that matters in French. That's all that matters. Tu très jolie, you're very pretty. Anyways, so, and the people like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's derived from Latin. Get it? Democracy, Democrat. So I tell them, the Brazilians aren't Hispanic. They're Portuguese. It was a Portuguese colony. Now, Hispanics come from people that come from the Spanish colonies, from the colonization from the Spanish Empire way back when. So pretty much any country that's Spanish speaking is Hispanic. Mind you, in South America you have French Guiana. Obviously they speak French, so they're not Hispanic. Even though they're in South America, Suriname, French Guiana, they're not Hispanic or Latino. It's pretty simple, but a lot of people don't understand that. Again, the whole Latino thing, I laugh because you're right and you're wrong. It's just understanding that. But yeah, you're Latino. You can be called Latino. I'm going to call you Latino from now on. That's you. But there is a small difference. But there is a big difference. And let me rephrase. So, and it's good to know that. Next question, come on. Absolutely. Like I said, it's easier for me. And again, I tell people this. Look, at the end of the day, there's fuel me, But here's the thing, is that, again, back to the low-lying fruit, not the 40%er, but people ask me, how do we reach out or include these people? Aside from what I mentioned tonight, also, to me, how I see the low-lying fruit is those business leaders, Hispanic business leaders. And I told, anyone know the chairman of Charlotte County? I told Bill, I said, Bill, look, this is easy. Go through the phone book. Go through real estate agents. Go through insurance agents. Go through doctors, attorneys, anyone with a vowel, whose last name ends with a vowel. Or obviously a Perez. It's simple. If you want to try to do something instantaneous or anecdotal to kind of reach out to them, if you would. So I said, if you do a simple message to them that has nothing to do with politics, maybe something social, blah blah blah. God gave us this. God gave us Florida. God's vacation. Some dopey. I don't know. Something that they can relate to. You message them. They're gonna be like, hey, who gave me this? Oh, Republican. Guess what? You're not shoving your politics down their throat. You're saying, hey, you're sending them something they can relate with. I mean, that's just simple off the top of my head. But look, these leaders, I call them leaders because a lot of these people are already established. Whether they're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. they're somewhat politically inclined because in some way, a lot of them aren't, but most of them are. And so if you reach out to them to some degree and say, hey, this is who we are, just kind of give you an FYI, nice to meet you, or by the way, we're not trying to shove it down your throat. These are the people that are, for the most part, legal here, but they have family members and friends, that may or may not be able to vote. It's easier because if you kind of reach out to them and they say, hey, I got this great message from the Republican Party. What do you think of this? Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that. And then it trickles down. It's like I like to call it trickle down immigration. But it makes sense. Does it make sense? I mean, if these people, like I remember growing up, my dad would look up to his friend who was an attorney. He has a friend from Venezuela. He looks up now to a friend who's a doctor from Venezuela. And he goes to him for everything, for advice, for everything. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then my dad's 70 years old. So my point is, if my dad is looking up to somebody who's the same age as him or a little bit younger and looking for his counsel, and he's a professional because my dad sees him as professional. My dad doesn't have a college education, but he looks to other people. So if my dad's doing it, how many other countless Hispanics are doing the same thing, or other immigrants? And that's why I was telling Bill, I go, that's if you want a quick anecdotal solution to try to blanket these people, send out a 400-piece mailer, spend a couple bucks, and just a simple message. By the way, FYI, paid for by the Republican Party of Charlotte County or wherever, we're thinking about you. Something that they understand, not about immigration, something social. It makes sense just to kind of, like I said, start the conversation, kind of get them thinking, hey, I thought the Republicans were all racist. Wait a minute, they sent me this nice message. It makes them think, maybe follow up down the road. You're not going to get them all to turn Democrat, but it's at least, again, starting that conversation. I think that's the most important thing to do. Absolutely. I mean, he kind of hammered on the point I made earlier, but I want to close with this. You brought up a point that I wanted to address as far as having more people like me. Look, this is simple. The narrative has been sent by Obama, and the media picks up whatever he says and does. I've been saying this for months. I said, we're going to need one candidate. If we win the presidency, it's got to be some, regardless if it's Rubio or Donald Duck or whomever. If they can set the narrative on what really affects immigration or Hispanic, why they come here, then the media is going to be forced to cover it. Regardless of how they were going to try to avoid it, they're going to be forced to cover it. But we didn't see that with George W. Bush, George H. Bush, not even Reagan when it came to immigration reform. They all capitulate to immigration reform, to Hispanic issues. If, let's say, Rubio, which I've spoke to Marco many times about this, he's in line with this, and if he wins or Ted wins, whomever wins, if they can opine, they can put their expresses to people, it'll make sense. If they say, look, this is about immigration. This is about economic reasons. This is who Hispanics are. This is where we came. Markham could tell his story and add the fact that, hey, they're here for this and not immigration. It's tied together. Then the media, you'll see the CNNs, they'll try to push it off like Marco's avoiding or whomever's avoiding immigration reform. But eventually it's going to start making sense to people. They're going to have to cover what he has to say. But it's not until we win the White House or someone like that, that takes over or wins the White House, that we're even going to be able to get anywhere as a party or as a country, because they're just going to go with whatever narrative they want to put out there. Anyways, I can talk here all night. Appreciate it. This is dangerous. Thanks.
All right, well, we'll give Javier one more big round of applause and just thank him. Hopefully his dinner's still nice and warm. Of course, as we get closer to the election, I think that's going to be a huge topic for discussion. And I know if you, of course, are going to subscribe to the Shark Tank, you'll get emails from him. And there's lots of very colorful information. There's a lot of great information. Very interesting, controversial, perfect if you're interested for some reading on what's going on, especially in the Hispanic community. So let's, of course, think, just like Javier had mentioned, how we can include, anybody that you know of, people that you come in contact with every day. We can, make a difference, each and every one of you. So we'll finish with that. We'll get you out nice and early. And of course, our next meeting will be the end of April. So everybody have a safe and happy Easter holiday. And we will see you the last Tuesday in April. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Oh, real quick.